So, in the previous videos, we started with looking at numbers in our Vedic thought process. We looked at seven, we looked at zero and infinity, and then we moved on to some of the symbols, and for example, we talked about the diya during Diwali, and then we talked about Krishna's flute and so on. So today I want to go back to numbers. And so let's look at the number three today. Right? Interesting number. One thing I should say is that the prime numbers are prime for a reason. It cannot be divided into anything else other than itself or one, right? So any prime number you can only divide by one, or you can divide by itself, in which case you'll get a one. That's all. Um, so number three also cannot be divided by anything. Even so, well, if I divide 3 by 2, I get 1.5. Yeah, but that's not a number. That you're using two other numbers, right? With a decimal. So number three, one thing we all know, you don't have to look at Vedic thought or anything like that, is the thing that we are all most familiar with, that is three, is time. So when you look at time, right, you have the past, the present, and the future. Bhuta, Vartamana, and Bhavishya, if you want to use Sanskrit. Whatever. The point is there is past, present, and the future, right? So we exist in the present time, right? But usually we try to live in the past and the future, right? We think of the past and think of things that happened. Some of them may be nice, some things we like, some things we don't like, some things we wish we could have done differently, and so on. And we're also always dreaming about the future, right? So, question is, this past, present, and future, these three time frames, right? That can be actually divided. When I say the present, that present, how long do you call the present? For example, this minute is present for me. 1 hour, 1 day, a month, year, maybe a lifetime. Can I call that present? So that is a flexible thing. It's not something fixed, right? So when I look at any length of time, the interesting thing is that you can look at it as the present. For example, when I was a 5-year-old kid, it was the present lifetime. When I was 70 years old, the present lifetime. So I can look at any length of time and say, this is the present. Yeah? The past is the same way, right? 5 minutes ago was the past, but 10 years ago was also past. So when I look at the future, the same thing. So there is this elasticity, if you will, in this three. It's not like a rigid thing. So we have to ask ourselves, okay, that's fine, but is there any relationship between these three? Does one affect the other? And here, I'll answer that in a few minutes, but this whole theory of karma siddhanta, right? The theory of karma is actually playing on this, right? So the karma of the past is defining my present, and the karma of my present will define my future, right? So this three things, the three time periods, if you will, with that elastic boundaries, they're actually related. They're related only in terms of karma, right? Now, what causes that and what we do or what it is, we can look at it later. But the fact is that they are related. Now, Let's keep that aside for 1 second. We'll come back to it. We'll keep it aside for a second. So when I'm existing, what state am I in? Right? I'm alive, right? Hopefully. And the question is that what state am I in? That also is the number three comes in again, right? There are only three states I can be in. One is I can be awake, or I can be sleeping, or I can be dreaming. All right. So when I'm awake, what happens is that all my sensory organs are turned on. So they're in contact with the universe, right? So it's gathering all that stuff, information, and feeding it to my mind. The mind is also open, the switch is turned on, right? So everything is turned on. And I'm interacting with things in the present, right? So it's the present thing. Like if I'm looking at something, I'm looking at it as it exists now, right? Now I'm going to take all those things and then I'm going to relate it to the past, right? I'll also take the present and map it into the future. So I'll say that, oh, the present is like this, but I would like the future to be like this, right? I dream about it. I dream about the future, right? So when you look at these three states of being, that is being awake, being in a sleep mode, or being in a dream state, that is linked to these three time periods, which is past, present, and future, right? Now you say, okay, fine. So what causes all this? What's creating all this, right? My experiences and so on. So here comes our Siddhanta, if I can use that word, our philosophy, if you will. And according to our way of thinking, the whole universe again exhibits three traits. Three again, okay? We call it Sat, Rajas, and Tamas. Three types of energy in nature, right? So nature exhibits three types, right? So these three things, the Sat, Rajas, and Tamas, what are they? Well, I can take you to the atomic level, okay? So if you take one atom, there's the neutron, there's a proton, and there's an electron, right? What do? Well, the proton and the electron have energy, right? Traditionally, we say electron has negative energy, proton has positive, but actually, I think it should be the other way around because the electron is the one that is going upwards from the atom. It's going up far, right? So that something that will take you upward is what we call sattvic or sat type of energy. Yeah. Now, something that will pull you down is what we refer to as tamasic or tamasa, right? Tamasic energy. Like something that will pull you down to the center, right? Now that, in case of the atom, what pulls the electron to the thing? It's a proton. Then there is thing that doesn't do anything. It's sort of like hanging around, doing nothing, no pulling down, no pulling up and all that. And that's the neutron. And something that will keep us in just a horizontal level is what we call rajasic or rajas type of energy, right? There's no thing called rajasic. I mean, that's a combination of Sanskrit and English, right? So it's rajas. The energy is rajas, right? Now, what happens is that all of us, long time ago, long time ago, at the time of creation, right? Every jiva, every soul is covered by the nature. When you come in contact with the nature at the time of creation, we are all covered with this thing we call lingadeha, with a covering, like a package, right? The moment that happens, all of us, every single one of us, will exhibit these three types of traits. Okay? Sattvic, Rajasic, and Tamasic. All of us. The question is percentage. That's all. So it varies from person to person. No two people are alike. We have said this before, right? So every single person has a unique combination of this sat, rajas, and tamas types of energy. What the sattvic energy does is elevates you spiritually, right? What rajasic does is basically keeps you in a horizontal movement or going in circles, in other words. And tamasic energy is something that will pull you downwards, right? So there are these three, what we call gunas. Guna means characteristic trait. So all of us in our nature, in our inner nature, innermost nature, we have this three types of, you can say trait, energy, whatever you want to call it, right? Now that will dictate our course of action. Now this thing which I refer to as course of action is not actually just physical action, but it's karma. Now karma, what is that made up of? Three things. Okay. So what are the three things in the karma? Well, there is thought, there is speech, and there is action, physical action. So thought is inside, speech is the interface between inside and outside, and action is outside, right? So inside, interface, action outside, right? The action outside is actually not in my control totally. Like I may want to do something, but I may not be able to do it, even if I try. Speech is somewhat in my control, not totally in my control, because so many times I want to say something, I end up saying something else. Even though I was not trying to say that, I was trying to say something else, right? But there is some control there. The thought is internal, right? Of course, there is influence of so many things on that, right? But at least we can say to some extent we have some control over what I want to think about, right? But the thing is, when I say there is control, what does that mean? It only means that these gunas, the three gunas, even in some, okay, this one thing I can say either English or Sanskrit. Say triguna is Sanskrit, three gunas is English. Three, the word three in English came from three in Sanskrit, I think. But anyway, whatever. The thing is that, so there are these three gunas that is driving that. Then you will say, oh, okay, so what that means is that no matter what the situation is, right? So if I have a fixed ratio of these three gunas, then I should react the same way all the time, right? But you and I know that actually that's not the case. We react differently. Like the same thing happens today, I may react one way, yeah? And tomorrow I may react a different way to the same event or the same situation, right? So what's with that? So here what happens is that actually our nature, our inner nature, the nature of the soul, the jiva, right? That's satrajas and tamas. There's another covering on top of that. And that covering, my body and my mind, this body and this mind that I got when I was born was actually given by my parents, right? They're the ones who caused this body. How did they get their bodies? Well, from my grandparents, or they did great grandparents, and so on, right? So our thought, our Vedic thought, it says that this genetic influence goes on for 6 generations. I don't even know who those guys were. So if I go back 6 generations ago, I don't know who they were, right? But their actions, their karma and all that, their way of thinking, their way of doing, and so on, actually will affect my thing. So this is in Sanskrit, we call it prabhava. Prabhava means just the influence. Okay. So there is this outer influence. I'll give you an example, right? So if you take a tennis ball, right? Suppose you take a green tennis ball. So you say, what's the color of this ball? You look at it, yeah, it's a green. Now I'm playing outside or something, and there's some muddy water, and the tennis ball falls into that muddy water. So now it becomes brown. So I can wash it. Okay, I can wash the thing all I want. It'll still be that brownish tinge. It's still there, right? Even if I wash it, it's not pure green as it used to be. Similarly, when this jiva, this soul, is put into this body, the moment it is put into this body, it's now colored, if you will, by this influence, this prabhava, this influence of genetics. Now, okay, fine. What will that genetic exhibit? Again, certain percentage of these three gunas. So now, the three gunas of the genetics may not match the three gunas of my nature. It may not, right? So now, what I exhibit is actually, there are 9 types of things, right? There are 3 possible, like there's Sat, Rajas, Tamas at the top. Each one of this has Sat, Rajas, Tamas, Sat, Rajas. So there are 9 things. So, okay, are you done? Is that it? Unfortunately, no. Because that is the genetic influence. That is just the genetic influence. We have the environmental influence, right? Like we go to school, we talk to people, we have friends, relatives, whatever, experiences, and so on. So there is another layer of influence, or prabhava, as called in Sanskrita, and that influence is the external. See, the genetic is the inside influence, yeah? But the other prabhava is the external influence, because we are all, we don't live in isolation, right? We are subjected to, especially nowadays, people are constantly looking at some nonsense on WhatsApp or Google or whatever. So we get influenced by all that. If somebody keeps repeating that over and over and over again, after some time, that's going to leave a mark on your process, on your thought process, right? So these 3 types of karma, what are they? Thought, speech, and action. Influenced by the 3 original, what we call swabhava, which is the nature of the jiva, further influenced by the 3 satrajas of the genetic influence, then it's influenced by the 3 satrajas tamas of the society at large, or where we live and, who we hang out with and so on, right? So, sure. No. Are you done? Mostly. So you say, okay, fine. So I have this 27 possibilities, right? So it's like a tree, man. So when something happens, how I react, it may come this way, or it may come this way, or it may come that way. It depends, right? It depends on so many things. It depends upon that situation and how I react to that, right? So what? Okay, fine. So I do all these things, then I have this karma. Then if some good comes out of it, fine. I can live with that because it's nice, good. But what if it's not so nice? So what is causing that not so nice experience? That in Samskrita, in again Vedic Vijnana would call it, Vedic science, we refer to this Tapa Traya. That also is 3. Right? Tapa is elevated temperature. Now, when we talk about temperature, we're not talking about like physical temperature, right? It's the energy, right? For example, even in this body, things are very finely controlled, right? So if the body of the temperature goes up, just 3, 4 degrees, we freak out, or if it goes down, God forbid, then it's even a bigger problem, right? If it goes down by 3, 4 degrees. So normally we have to deal with elevation, not going down, right? Unless some serious problem is there. So this tapatraya, that elevated temperature, can happen not just to the body, it can also happen to the mind. And even further, even the jiva, the soul, can feel that, right? Just like if you have fever, right? Then you feel that you're not comfortable, right? So mentally also, if I have fever, so to speak, I feel that too. Even though the actual temperature is in the body or in the mind. But I'm living inside that, right? So I'm existing. It's like sitting in a car that's getting very hot, right? Now, if you come out of the car, it may not be that hot, but if you're sitting in a black car in hot sunshine, then it's going to be very hot inside. So similarly, when you're existing inside that, inside this body and the mind, then you feel that heat, you feel that tapa, right? So what are these three types of tapa, and what can cause that, and is there something I can do about any of these things? Those three types of tapa, the tapatraya, as we call it, which is basically suffering, if you will, right? So what happens, what causes that is, first thing is adi atma, right? Something internal. That suffering can be internal. The second one depends upon the bhuta. Bhuta means the five panchabhuta, that is the five elements. The universe is made up of five elements, right? And one of those can cause that. We look at in a second some details. Then there's a third one, which is called adidaiva. That is, divine forces can cause that also. So wait. In the first place, if there is something happening inside, what do you mean by that? Well, it could be, like I said before, you could have physical fever, you could have mental issues, right? So these are all internal. It is happening Atma is self. It is happening inside. You can also have suffering because of, we just saw that, right? Just in the Western North Carolina, um, there was an issue, right? And there are poor people, some of them are still suffering because of that. So one of the elements, maybe there's a flood, maybe there's a hurricane, maybe drought, So all of these things, what nature causes, it's all because of one of these five elements, either in excess or in shortage. Like when you don't have water, we have problem. When there's excess water, you have problem, right? When there's a storm, that's okay. But if there's excess of it, the wind, we do need wind, but we don't want 150 miles an hour wind, right? So anything in excess caused by nature is a problem, right? Then there's a third kind, we already said that, but these divine forces, I'm talking about Devata Shaktis. For every, like for example, we talked about the Bhuta, right? Every single thing is sort of controlled by, not independently, but it's a dependent thing. Everything depends on God, but it's it's controlled by, it's like a manager, right, for each thing, right? And it's not just the elements. There's somebody, for example, I may be driving home and let's say a truck comes and hits my car or something like that. God forbid, but it happens, right? Accidents happen. So we have a tendency to think that all these things it's just random. Like if you say, why was there a flood, or why was there a hurricane, or something like that? Say, oh, because there's a low pressure here and a high pressure there. And so, but the thing is that that's all fine, but why was there a high pressure there? We're not talking about how it happened. We're talking about why did it happen, right? So is it just, do things happen randomly? And it's just what people call quote unquote luck. So were you just unlucky, or did it happen by design? Now, in the Vedic thought, we do not believe in randomness. We don't believe in randomness. We don't think anything is random, right? Every single thing happens by design. So you may say that, so does God enjoy making people suffer? Like, would he just unleash a hurricane or something, and all these people suffering, crying, losing their home? Does he sit as a ha ha, see what I can do? No, of course not. Of course not. That's not what our things are. It's what we attract through our karma, right? So if an individual, just one individual, needs to quote unquote suffer this tapa, that will be the atma tapa. He will suffer inside. It's not affecting anybody else. It's just me. Yeah. But if there is a larger group of people, even there are variations depending on that person. Like one person's house gets blown away, other person's doesn't get blown away. Right? What does that? Not randomness. Right? So even there's some individual mapping, but by and large, there is a regional influence of this. Right? So it's all very complicated. It's actually complicated. So what happens is, like in a society, my karma, your karma, his karma, it all has to come together. And things have to happen. So logistically, it's a nightmare. Only God can handle that. None of us can handle that, right? So all of these things that come together is actually, it's the karma that dictates the tapa. But what is the connecting thing in between? It is the guna. That's what rajas and tamas. So it is due to karma, guna and karma. Nature, like the innermost nature, right? That nature, what we call guna, my nature of the self, nature of the jiva, that with what has to happen in the future. We already said that this past, present, and future. Look, if you think that only present exists, past doesn't exist, future doesn't exist, you're a nutcase. I mean, nobody will. What do you? So, so if I say that, okay, I just have this one life. This is my lifetime. This is the present life, right? Present lifetime. So everything is defined. So it starts at my birth and ends at my death. We don't believe that. We think that it's one continuous thing. There was a past. Like, why is it that some people have a lot of money when they're born? Some people are very poor. Why is it some people are, you know, comfortable and some people are not, and so on? So it cannot be random. Surely it cannot be random. So the present situation is dependent on the past. So you say, past what? Past life, whatever you did in the past. Now, what you're doing now. So if you say that, look, I worked very hard, I'm a good person. I worked very, very hard and I did a lot of good for a lot of people, but I really didn't get much in return. Well, nobody's denied anything, right? So, like I said before, it is the present karma that will define the future. So we're going to get it, right? So again, I'm telling you our way of thinking, our thought process. You can agree with that, you can disagree with that. That's up to you. But my job is to just explain what we think, right? What we believe. So this is the reason why you cannot have just one lifetime. Because in that lifetime, you cannot give people one set of constraints until you operate within these constraints. Yet I'll hold you responsible for what you. Come on. That cannot be. How can that be, right? For example, if you say, okay, why don't you do dana? That is, give offering to society, money. Well, for me to do that, first I should have money, isn't it? So if you put me in a situation where I have no money, where's the question of giving or offering? So you cannot put me in a spot where I don't have anything. I say, aha, you're going to get punished. Why? Because you didn't give anything. But I didn't have anything. So you put me in this position. How can I give anything, right? So this sequence of karma, as we go through life after life after life, right? So I said, then what is my role in all this? What's my role? Well, one of the things is that we should realize that there are these influences outside. There are people with agenda, whatever it may be. It may be a good agenda also. It need not be bad. It may be good agenda, bad agenda, who knows, right? But people have some agenda. Like if you look at what you see on the TV or whatever, right? They all have some agenda. Okay, they do. And whatever it may be something as simple as they want to reach a lot of people because more people, they can charge more for advertisement, right? So how do you get people? If you give some very boring talk and all that, nobody's going to watch your show. So you have to bring in excitement. So bring in excitement, you say, you take some little thing and blow it out of proportion or whatever, right? So they have an agenda. Everybody has an agenda, right? So these external influences are there. So first we have to recognize that there is external influences, right? And try to overcome that. Think beyond that. Think deeper than that, right? And say that, can I peel away this? That's easier said than done. But can I peel away these influences that I've been subjected to from the time I was a little kid, right? Society's beliefs, society's influences, my teachers, my parents, or whoever, right? So all those friends, all those influences were there. So can I think when I think of something, when I say something, when I try to do something, can I, to the at least to the extent that we can we peel away that thing? Genetic thing is harder. At least that I may be able to do. How do you peel away your genetic thing? Eh? That's even harder. But but it's not impossible, but it is harder, much harder. Because it's part of you, it's part of your body, it's part of your mind. That's how you think, because it's there. It's like I said before, it's like the tennis ball that's got into muddy water, right? And it's become brown, right? How do you wash? But we can wash it, right? So if you wash it off, if you wash it with soap and water, then to some extent at least that thing is gone. So we too can cleanse our mind, right, of those genetic influences also. But our nature is our nature. We'll do things according to that. So we can end this thing by one quote from Sri Krishna in Bhagavad Gita. He said, Swadharme nidhanam shreyaha paradharmo bhayavaha. That can be interpreted in so many different ways. But Swadharma, that is my own nature, whatever my nature dictates, right? It's any day far, far better than what somebody else dictates to me. Because my nature can deal with the outcomes. Somebody else's nature, if I live according to somebody else's agenda or somebody's nature, I may not be able to deal with the outcomes of my thought, speech, or action. So, in summary, we can say that if I look at the number 3, right? So many things, so many things. Nature itself exhibits these 3 traits, Sat, Rajas, and Tamas, which of course because I came in contact with that nature, I exhibit that too, to varying degree depending on my nature of me, right? And then I'm subjected to genetic, outside, and all these things. All these 3 influences can create these 3 types of tapa, which actually will affect me in my karma. And that karma also has 3 parts: thought, speech, and action, which will result in what happens in this span of time, which is past, present, and future. That's number 3 in Vedic thought.